The NFL is full of fairy tale stories, with countless players overcoming the odds to deliver greatness. In 2023, San Francisco 49ers fans almost witnessed the greatest fairy tale story in NFL history. The story of Mr. Irrelevant leading their team to Super Bowl glory. Although Brock Purdy and the 49ers fell just short, his incredible journey from being the last pick in the draft to one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL is jaw-dropping. The 7th round draft tag still makes him one of the most polarizing quarterbacks in the NFL. But those who know football know the 49ers have a serious player on their hands. The question is, how do they find them? Since being selected as the 262nd pick in the NFL Draft, Brock Purdy has played in 29 games after Week 4 in the 2024 NFL season, passing for 6,784 yards, 49 touchdowns, and 17 interceptions. He's maintained an impressive quarterback rating of 110.3 and has already earned both a Pro Bowl nod and the title of NFL passer rating leader. In his rookie season, he took over from an injured Jimmy Garoppolo and promptly took the team to the NFC Championship game before going one better and reaching the Super Bowl as a sophomore in his first full season as a starter. There's no two ways about it. Brock Purdy is pretty damn good, and he's massively overperformed based on his draft selection. There aren't many stories of late-round quarterbacks going on to have long and successful careers, let alone 7th rounders, but the ones that do tend to be pretty special. Dak Prescott has made a good name for himself as a 4th round pick in Dallas, and you might have heard of a certain Tom Brady, who was taken in the 6th round by New England back in 2000. With Brock Purdy now joining the list, many people are wondering how he slipped so far in the draft and how the 49ers ultimately found him. The story is a good one, so let's get stuck in. Obviously, Brock Purdy plays a massive part in this story, but we are going to come on to him a bit later. First, we actually have to go back to the 2017 NFL Draft and remind ourselves of the state of the 49ers. Fresh off a horrendous 2-14 season, the Niners held the 2nd overall pick in the draft, and the men in charge of figuring out how to use that pick were the newly signed head coach Kyle Shanahan and general manager John Lynch. At the time, the 49ers were in the market for a quarterback, and as many of you will likely be aware, a certain Patrick Mahomes was lingering in this 2017 draft class. Unfortunately, the 49ers didn't even do a proper deep dive into him or the other quarterbacks at the top of this draft because they had their eyes set on Kirk Cousins, who they expected to become available in the following offseason. The one quarterback they did look at was C.J. Beathard, who they traded up to take in the 3rd round. It was an interesting strategy for the new front office, and one they deviated from pretty quickly when they made an in-season trade for Jimmy Garoppolo, who was backing up Tom Brady in New England at the time. Garoppolo enjoyed an up-and-down career in San Fran, taking the team to the Super Bowl in 2019, but also struggling with injuries and inconsistent play. Beathard never clicked with the team and left in 2020, which coincidentally gave the 49ers the very compensatory pick they used to take Brock Purdy in 2022. When that 2022 draft came around, the 49ers did not need a quarterback, as they still had Jimmy Garoppolo on the roster and were just about to turn the team over to Trey Lance, the 3rd overall selection in 2021, who they traded up for due to Jimmy's injuries and frustrating play. With a quarterback room already pretty full, head coach Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch were not paying very close attention to the 2022 class of quarterbacks. Thankfully, someone in the building was. That person was Steve Slowik. Steve Slowik is the brother of Bobby Slowik, the man credited with masterminding C.J. Stroud's record-breaking rookie season in Houston as their offensive coordinator. Unlike his brother, Steve has stuck to the scouting route. As the area scout that covered Iowa, Slowik had been keeping an eye on Brock Purdy throughout his career as an Iowa State Cyclone, paying particular attention to his ability to completely transform the fortunes of the Cyclones program. He watched as Purdy joined a team that had enjoyed just one winning season in the last 8 and instantly turned them into perennial winners in the Big 12. Purdy quickly earned the starting role as a true freshman in 2018 before leading the team to 4 straight winning seasons. This was highlighted by a 9-3 record in 2020, which saw the Cyclones reach a high ranking of 6 and earn a Fiesta Bowl win. By the end of that 2020 season, Purdy had passed for 8,982 yards, 62 touchdowns, and 25 interceptions. It was an impressive resume, and the 49ers had noticed. John Lynch has publicly said that the 49ers were pretty high on Purdy prior to the 2021 draft, but never got the chance to take him because Purdy decided to go back for a fourth year at Iowa State. In that senior season as a Cyclone, Purdy completed 71.7% of his passes for 3,188 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. However, the team could only muster up a 7-6 record, and the 49ers' grades on Purdy were a little bit lower and more inconsistent. Nevertheless, Slowik, having kept an eye on Purdy throughout his entire college career, was pretty convinced, which meant Purdy remained on the team's draft board. With the 49ers officially keeping Brock Purdy in consideration, they handed him over to quarterbacks coach Brian Griese to do some due diligence. Griese and Slowik set up Zoom calls with Purdy to learn more about him as a person, discussing specific Iowa State plays and Purdy's process when working through them. They already had a pretty good idea of his qualities as a leader, given what he had done with the Cyclones program, and these Zoom calls confirmed what they needed to know about Purdy's football IQ. They were sold. Between the two of them, Griese and Slowik took Purdy's resume and their analysis to Shanahan and Lynch, making a strong case that this was a quarterback worth taking. The only problem was that the 49ers had invested a third overall pick in the quarterback position just 1 year earlier and also had a veteran on the roster in Garoppolo. Kyle Shanahan, when speaking about the pre-draft process, admitted to reporters that he didn't think that they would be able to take a quarterback based on where the roster was at and what needs they needed to fill in the 2022 draft. He admitted that they had a 4th-round grade on Purdy, but the reality was that quarterback was a low priority at the time. As the NFL draft rolled around, a long list of underwhelming quarterbacks heard their names called over the first 2 days. Kenny Pickett was the first to go with the 20th pick of round 1, before Desmond Ridder, Malik Willis, and Matt Corral went in round 3. Round 4 came and went, as did rounds 5 and 6. After almost 3 days of intense draft action, the final selection was nearing, and Brock Purdy was still on the clock. You see, while the 49ers were pretty high on Purdy, the rest of the league and many draft analysts were not. Purdy was knocked for being a subpar athlete who lacked arm strength and had small hands, traits teams typically want to see in a modern quarterback. Anyway, with the draft nearing an end, the 49ers were about to be on the clock, and the war room was chaotic. Reflecting on that crucial moment, Kyle Shanahan told Peter King about the frantic discussions taking place in an attempt to figure out who the team should make Mr. Irrelevant. In particular, he remembers looking at Purdy's 4th-round grade standing out on their board as the rounds flew by. San Francisco's war room was full of position coaches making the case for certain players, and people were pointing out that a third quarterback on the roster was not exactly a serious need, especially considering they gave up 3 draft picks for Trey Lance the year before. However, when the 49ers were officially put on the clock for the final pick of the draft, one man made the decision, an easy one to make. That man was the CEO, Jed York. York asked the room who was the best player available, to which Shanahan replied, Purdy. In response to that, York simply said, "I don't get why there's a discussion. If you guys think he's the best player." That was all they needed to hear, and just minutes later, Brock Purdy was a San Francisco 49er. Brock Purdy entered the 2022 season as the 3rd-string quarterback, and unusually, the team decided to keep all 3 quarterbacks active on the roster for the season. Lynch has since pointed out that this alone was a testament to how much they liked Purdy and how much he had impressed them during the preseason process. And, as we all know, the decision to draft him was vindicated almost instantly. Trey Lance suffered a season-ending injury in just the 2nd game of the season, and Jimmy Garoppolo joined him in the medical tent in Week 13. Enter Mr. Irrelevant. Purdy took over from Garoppolo halfway through the Week 13 fixture against Miami and led the team to a 33-17 win. He then made his first start 1 week later against Tampa Bay, where he defeated Tom Brady's Buccaneers 35-7. It wasn't looking so irrelevant anymore. You see, while many of the negative scouting comments were true regarding Purdy's size and lack of arm strength in comparison to superstar quarterbacks like Mahomes and Josh Allen, he made up for that in many other ways. Notably, he progresses through his reads at elite speed, and his ability to throw with anticipation is among the best in the NFL. Add in the fact that he is far more shifty on his feet and likes to take risks, and you have a quarterback who can execute Shanahan's timing-based system perfectly, but also add a sprinkle of magic when things break down. Oh yes, he also landed in the mid-90s on the S2 cognition test, which put him on par with Drew Brees and Patrick Mahomes. The co-founder of the test, Brandon Ally, reacted to this by saying, "The game will never be too fast for Brock. Purdy led the team to 6 wins to close out the season before putting up 332 passing yards and 3 touchdowns against divisional rival Seattle Seahawks in his first ever playoff game. Unfortunately, the unlikely fairy tale story came to an end in the NFC Championship game when he suffered a first-quarter injury against the Philadelphia Eagles, ruling him out for the game and all but ending the 49ers season. Including the playoffs, Purdy's rookie season produced 1,943 yards and 16 touchdowns to just 4 interceptions from 9 full games played. It was a stunning effort from the 7th rounder, but people were wary of his ability to keep it up in 2023. Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch were among those who were not doubting his quality, proven by their willingness to trade away Trey Lance during the preseason and confirm Purdy as the starter. He rewarded the faith by delivering 4,280 yards, 31 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions throughout his first full season in charge, before defeating the Packers and Lions in the playoffs to set up a Super Bowl clash with the Kansas City Chiefs. Purdy's performances in the playoffs were fantastic to see, proving the 49ers' evaluation right. Since drafting him, Lynch has said that Purdy's clutch tendencies at Iowa stood out to him. While on KNBR 680's Murph and Mac show, he said when they needed 3 points on a 2-minute drive, he'd get the 3 points. When they needed the touchdown, he'd get the touchdown. That clutchness came up exactly when the 49ers needed it, with Purdy overcoming shaky starts in both playoff games to deliver a game-winning drive against the Packers in the divisional round and 5 straight scoring drives to overcome a record deficit in the NFC Championship game against Detroit. He was then solid on the big stage in the Super Bowl, passing for 255 yards, 1 touchdown, and 0 interceptions, but the team fell short in overtime. Steve Spagnuolo has since praised Purdy for his ability to carve up their incredibly strong defense in the first half, forcing them to switch from a zone coverage approach to man coverage in the second, something that ultimately helped the Chiefs get the win. While that loss was a heartbreaker for San Francisco and for Brock Purdy, they can at least be happy that they have a starting quarterback who can operate Kyle Shanahan's system perfectly. And both Shanahan and Lynch can be very grateful that their embarrassing Trey Lance blunder has gone mostly unpunished thanks to the remarkable story of Brock Purdy. I think it's fair to say that they both owe Steve Slowik, the man who found Purdy, a lot. What do you make of this crazy story? And what do you think would have happened if Slowik hadn't spotted Brock Purdy? Let me know in the comments.